I'm asking about images. What do you think of the Second Council of Nicaea? What do you think of the Orthodox distinction of 3D images and 2D images, such as the rejection of a crucifix, etc.? Thank you, Pastor. Grace and peace to you, your brother, W.C. Dean.
So it would seem I'm a biased party to the question, right? Given that I carry this everywhere I go, and I'm part of an order of men who pray the Psalms, carry Bibles, and carry crucifixes. So, buyer beware of my answer, I suppose I would say to you. I'm an idolater according to your theory. You should flee and run. But then again, all Lutherans who are venerating, and then some, adoring even the host of the Lord's Supper, certainly by eating and drinking it, but recognizing that it is their God and King, like that idolatry of bread and wine that only represents Jesus as you ascend to feast on him in heaven, that should keep us from like really being with the hand of fellowship at the end of the day more than this. Now, feel my snark? I hope you did. We Lutherans and Reform, we have such a great history. What we want, I think, is honest engagement, which is what you're giving, and that's great. So you're coming to me, a Lutheran, to get more commentary from a Lutheran on a first source, if I'm understanding your question, right? And the first source that you're talking about isn't me, or say Lutheranism per se. You're asking when the Lutherans and or Reformed and or Wesleyans and or let's just throw the Romans in there, have a conversation about Christianity. Do we understand what the people in the 700s believed? Do we understand what the people in the 500s believed? Do we understand what the people in the 300s believed? If they all believe the same stuff, do we still believe that? Which is how the creeds come to be fairly important, right? Because they're the things everyone's always believed. And if you reject them just because you don't like creeds for some random new reason, like that's not going to maybe go well for everybody. Look around a little bit, yeah? So commentary then on the Second Council of Nicaea and what it has to say about iconoclasm, that is the rejection of images in some way, shape, or form, and how there was at that time recognized a distinction in the East. The East now makes a distinction between 3D and 2D. I don't know about the distinction then. Okay, before I go off and say something I don't know anything about. Why is this not? Oh, that's a picture now. The Second Council of Nicaea is something I wouldn't call it my forte, right? I'm working with Wikipedia as my first source, and I got a quote that is really worth looking at, and so I'm going to give Meredith a moment to try to find it. It's in the downloads as a photo that I pulled over recently. So you should be able to see it, and if you can get it up on the screen, that's great. It's got this quote from sometime during this council, which happened in 787. So this is late Roman Empire. Things are collapsing and reassessing and coming together. Their great wide expansion has been broken. And then you have an east-west divide, which has worked pretty well, but the west is getting weaker. And so before I get into the history of it, though, let me give you kind of the Lutheran view, as I understand it, of creeds and councils, church fathers and the like, and that is that anything that comes from the past we receive as tradition. False tradition, heterodox tradition. There's tradition, and you can learn from all tradition. You can see in tradition those who are approved. This is why St. Paul talks about how divisions must come in the church, right? To show those who are approved. That's 1 Corinthians 1 and 2. So our position is that these fights of old, they revealed that kind of golden thread that I was talking about, that Christians in every place believe Christianity. They hold on to what really is. And so you can find the same thing being taught throughout history. And then again, the Nicene Creed, as we do speak it every week in all churches that would call themselves Lutheran, and I would hope anybody that would call themselves Protestant would speak that creed with great regularity and not try to hang on to any type of Western history as Christians without that creed. But, that comes from the First Council of Nicaea, which itself is not without debate. Okay, so you want our position on councils? Here's our position on councils. The Council of Nicaea was followed up by the Council of, I believe, Chalcedon, right? No. It's followed up by the Council of Constantinople, wherein the so-called filioque, that the Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son, was affirmed at this second part, right, in Constantinople, and yet there were some who were unrepresented. And so to this day, if I'm not mistaken, East and West, part of the divide, in fact, is over this filioque issue, right? Whether or not it actually belongs in the creed. And while some will argue that it's about what it says, others will argue that it's just about how they want the actual ecumenical creed, and that it had to be this one where everybody was at it. Okay, so right there, you see how useless the idea of an ecumenical creed is as an actual ecumenical final thing. I should say ecumenical creed. How useless the idea of an ecumenical council is as a final arbiter, that we would all be able to look at this history of those who got together saying we're the only ones, leaving something, and that we have to take everything that they say. Instead, what we should see is what they were arguing about and how divided they were, and then try to ask, how is this similar to where we are today? Because we know that the battle the church faces is always the same battle. It is always against the glory of Christ being replaced with the glory of creation, right? It's always going to be about that. So what was going on at this time that was causing this? I mean, we weren't there again, but the image that Meredith maybe has found by now, be able to get up there?
I found it, but what would you like to actually see? The actual picture or okay.
If you know, the quote, as the sacred,
okay,
as the sacred and life-giving cross. Okay, so here was the theology that they determined for talking about what's acceptable with an image. And I think this is pretty good, frankly. So, first I said, we're not bound to these councils. But second, this is what they came up with as their answer to, can you have an image set up and bow down before it? All right? Okay. So they say, as the sacred and life-giving cross is everywhere set up as a symbol, so also should the images of Jesus Christ, the Virgin Mary, the holy angels, as well as those of the saints and other pious and holy men be embodied in the manufacture of sacred vessels, tapestries, vestments, etc., and exhibited on the walls of churches, in the homes, and in all conspicuous places, by the roadside and everywhere, to be revered by all who might see them. For the more they are contemplated, the more they move to fervent memory of their prototypes. Therefore, it is proper to accord to them a fervent and reverent veneration, not, however, the veritable adoration which, according to our faith, belongs to the divine being alone. Worship, right? Worship would be the English word. For the honor accorded to the image passes over to its prototype, and whoever venerate the image venerate in it the reality of what is there represented. So I'll just say that before we go to 2D, 3D at all, it's a piece of wood. I look at it often. I carry it often. I think with it. I use it as a object permanence reminder as well. Something that if I have emotions that are tough, I'll try to not feel this so they go away. I'll feel this as a place where the pain that's inside can be allowed to have contact with something outside. It's a kind of CPTSD tool. It is only valuable to me in any way, shape, or form because every time I look at it, I'm reminded of Jesus Christ, the actual God-man, incarnate, dead, risen, the guy I preach. What more power does it have? Well, whatever it does, we don't know. Science says none, right? Pagan voodoo says all sorts. We say the hidden things are left to Jesus, but we will confess what he has given us. And so again, that creation has been redeemed in the man Jesus and his actual image is the point of that text that was just read and confessed from that council, which is that because creation has been redeemed, so long as the picture that you see accords with who Jesus is and what he's done and points to him as your King and Lord, then it is a picture of him. And he knows that. And he will use that, just as he uses the image of the cross. And anybody who would say otherwise, their point is, well, you got to take it down the cross too then, don't you? Got to take down the cross then too. And this is where, so if we're going to get into the 3D, 2D distinction, which is, I believe, an East-West Roman Eastern Orthodox thing that's part of the Great Schism, am I the master historian of the Great Schism? No, I just know passing reference to the thing. But, what is it? It's the first Reformation. Is it the Reformation the Lutherans wanted it to be? No, we didn't even exist yet. And even ours wasn't what we wanted it to be. That's part of our problem is discontent, you notice? Yeah. So, but what it was the first split of the church. And look who split it. We got that question coming up here in a moment. Why is to say that the Pope is the Antichrist the most unifying thing you can do in all of Christianity? Because look at that. What's the split really about, East and West? But they say, or I've heard it said, because you never know, I've heard it said that, again, the 3D image, the West adopts, and the 2D image is only allowed, the icon is only allowed in the East. And again, I'm not even going to tread into the narrows of why they make that argument. I don't know. I don't care to know. Because again, the council that I'm going to stand with just said, is this based on the fact that we can look at a cross? Since we can look at a cross as an image, then anything that tells us about Jesus is just the same, right? And the problem is when the story stops telling you about Jesus. So when the statue of Saint Joseph isn't telling you about how he was a good father to his son Jesus so that you might be saved by Jesus, and instead he's helping you pray to get out of jail or whatever it is Joseph's patron saint of, I don't know. See, now we've moved across the thing that the council says don't do. And that's where their fight at that time is very obvious, and their fight still remains, right? Forget all the nuances about our intricacies and understand their fight's against false worship. Worshiping something that's not Jesus in Jesus' name versus worshiping Jesus in Jesus' name. And they want to make sure that nobody's worshiping statues like all them their pagans always do. And they also want to make sure that we understand that Christians can make art, because art is what God has redeemed us to do. And we sing and we draw and we write and we dream about a future that we know is certain in Him. And we have the hope to inspire the world to join us. They can even sing our songs. We would not have Western pop music without Bach. We would not have it. It could not be. He made the kind of music that allowed our civilization to exist, right? That's a tangent there. Back to 2D and 3D, though. Like, this, I got no time for that. Common sense tells you there's no difference between the 2D and 3D object. You can worship either one of them. Is the television 2D or 3D? You tell me people aren't worshiping those pictures? And I think this a lot these days. As I go into homes and I see a wall of kids. And I see no Jesus nowhere. And I go, they're just pictures. They're just images. They're just icons. Where is that line of worship? Where is that line of idolatry? And if you think it's as simple as, well, that one's 3D, so we can't do that one. But 2D, we're good. Like, you missed human nature, I think. You're really just missing human nature on this one. Yeah. So there you go. I don't know if there's a first source Lutheran commentary on this. I can point you to our confessions and the worship of saints in the Augsburg Confession and its apology. It's probably a good place to go. I do believe it mentions images there. But our classic position is going to be that of the East, in that since the creation's been redeemed by Christ, we can indeed have images. And then that of the West, 3D is okay because Jesus is 3D. The prototype is the thing that matters. What I mean by that? Jesus, the real Jesus, is the thing that matters, right? So, for example, here, look. This is a crucifix, right? Like, everyone can agree this is a crucifix. Is the man on the crucifix black or white? Well, the color's black, okay. And he's actually also kind of carved to look like an African man. Not probably, because he was carved by an African man. So, like, does that make this not an acceptable Jesus? No. Well, what if Jesus didn't have long hair? Like, he probably didn't, at least not the way that he's drawn having in all the Western stuff, right? Does that make those just not Jesus? Like, are you going to worry about the color of his clothing? The point is that all of creation is capable of giving thanksgiving to our Lord Jesus Christ for what he has done in the heart, mouth, and hands of man. And so, knowing that, we can see creation as the reminder that it is of the glory of God and tune it to help us sing his praise. And indeed, that would be what any type of prayer focus, whether it's just a bead, well, the beads are okay, but not the statues. I mean, really? Like, you live in creation. You're going to have created things tied to worship. The question is, can you worship without them? No. If I lose my crucifix, can I still pray? That's a fun one. Test yourself with that one. Try it sometime. Because if you get used to having a prayer focus, you're going to miss it. Oh, I got to go find that before I can pray. Wait a minute. Do I? Do I have to? Oh, no, I don't. Okay. But then it still worked, didn't it, now, in teaching you not to rely on it. And that's where it's really about the fight within your heart and the words that come out of your mouth more than whether or not you got the right rules from the 800s. You follow me? I'm talking right to you as the question, right? I'm glad you're doing the first source research. I'm so thankful you pointed me to that little text, because that's really a nice summary of why crucifixes are cool. So I'd say, without adopting the entire Second Nicene Ecumenical Council, I'll give a hearty hey-ho to that little bit I quoted. Absolutely. Good stuff. On board.